This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Good morning from Beijing. I'm Kate Kuei. December 29th, 2022, right after China adjusted its COVID-19 quarantine measures, SME delegations from Zhejiang Province in China chartered flights to Germany, France, and other European countries to meet with their business partners, their clients, and their customers. Well, during past 3 years' time, doors of international trade were more or less shut due to the pandemic. Supply chain was disrupted, business volume was impacted, and companies focusing on cross-border trade and export were struggling to survive. Post-COVID recovery is now on the way, but how to make sure that SMEs are getting enough support from the government and also making sure financing channels are open and smooth are practicality and realities we need to face now. Well, in today's panel, we want to share with you some real stories during this SME trip to Europe. And also, we will have discussions on the challenges and opportunities ahead of us on this road to recovery. Well, my guests today are Mr. Chen Zhicheng, who is the Deputy Director General, Department of Commerce of Zhejiang Province, Mr. Shao Yinhua, Deputy Director of Jinhua Commerce Bureau of Zhejiang Province, and Chen Siqi, who is the partner of Cathay Capital, and Zhang Gong, a professor at the University of International Business and Economics, Lillian Li, General Manager, Zhejiang Dream Room Industry and Trade, and Wang Zhengwei, Vice President from BLG Group, and also Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder and president of Schiller Institute, will join us slightly late today from Germany to discuss the future projections of Chinese economies. Government support is critical. First of all, why European countries are your first stop when you lead the delegation? And secondly, how important do you think government policy can facilitate support to this post-COVID recovery? 我这个问题是给陈厅长的。首先第一个就是在整个的这个出海去找订单的这个过程当中，为什么选择欧洲作为第一站？这是第一个问题。第二个问题，从政府的角度上来说，我们到底要出台什么样的政策？政策力度要怎么样才能更好、更有效地帮助企业在后疫情时代真正实现复苏？
好的。谢谢主持人啊，我还是用中文来回答啊。
I prefer to speak in
本来也可以用英文回答啊，因为要稍微再准备一下。第一个呢是为什么选择欧洲啊？我想主要还是有这么几个。
As to the first question, why Europe? I have several considerations.
特别是这个今年啊，就是2022年啊，
particularly in 2022. Ever since March 2022, many countries have released their containment policies, and exhibitions thrived overseas. For us, we have to consider to enhance our partnership with the wealthiest partners. So, Zhejiang corporations must go global to reach out on a wider basis. As to EU, EU is our largest importer and exporter in Zhejiang Province. So we support the local enterprises to go global in order to make a bigger presence in Europe. So we send out such a strong signal. That is one consideration. Secondly, especially EU, boasts many venues of international exhibitions and many convention corporations like Frankfurt and Inkman. Those all reside in EU. So we hope to partner more with those convention corporations in EU. For foreign trade, companies participating in those exhibitions would be an important platform to acquire new orders and new customers. Maybe 80% come from those exhibitions. That's why we highlight our partnership with those partners in EU. We have accompanied our companies to go to those exhibitions, which will generate very good results. If you look at the tangible results, in our first stop, we have participated in a food and raw material exhibition held in Paris. On average, our companies have received 50 purchasers, and 80% are new customers. Many customers even line in a long queue in order to discuss in more details with our companies. So we have been very popular, and the total volume registered 1 billion RMB yuan. That's why we chose Europe as our first stop. Of course, we will go beyond just Europe. We'll support to reach to, for example, Middle East, Americas. There will be all sorts of exhibitions and conventions. In December, there were 20 of those events. And when 12 billion have been contracted. So the first stop was Europe, but we are not limited just to Europe. That's for one thing. Secondly, while supporting our enterprises to explore bigger markets, in 2022, Zhejiang Provincial People's Government has supported the business people to enjoy more facilitation policies. For example, the visa approval. We will try to streamline the whole process. We have been working with Zhejiang Provincial Department of Public Security since June the 7th, 2022 till the end of 2022. In the half year's time, we have increased the number of visa approvals. For those going to France or other European countries, we have facilitated the procedure. We asked our partners, what time does it take to have a visa in France? They said 3 months, but in Zhejiang Province, we need only 5 days, 5 working days. So in terms of facilitating the traveling of business people, like visa approval, and participating in international exhibitions overseas, we have come up with a series of preferential policies. In reality, those measures have really generated some very good outcomes. Within a short period of time, we organized a batch of those economic and trade companies to go out with our full preparation and some preferential treatment. In our journey to Europe, many overseas institutions like the CEO called Walk from Work Claire received us in person, who expressed a strong willingness to cooperate with us. Thank you, Director General Chen, for that detail, and we will invite you to share more about those incentives later.
Siqi, you are a veteran in the PE sector, and your fund has a lot of legacy and relationship with European countries, especially France. Now, with a 3 years pandemic, with a lot of policies in China, even with our quarantine measures, how do you view the current investors' confidence towards China? Are they still willing to invest into China? Has the confidence been impacted, or has the confidence been recovered if it was being impacted before?
I think this is a big question. Cathay is actually a global platform with more than 10 offices globally.
Right.
But 70% of our investors are from European countries. So we have 20 plus Fortune 500 company from France. So, and also we have a lot of like SME entrepreneur as our private investor.
Right.
So I have found one thing in common, which is a long China policy. I can give you one example, which is Valeo. That's like an automotive supply company. They have 32 factories inside China. But as of now, they are not only opening up the factory, they are trying to open up an R&D center in the Shanghai and Suzhou area. In the year 2020, they even have one of the biggest global R&D center in the world.
Right.
So, and during our conversation with all those like industry players, one of the top priority is the deal flow from China. They want to understand what's happening in China,
Sure.
what's the most innovation thing happened here. So I think they are still very confident.
Right. So confidence is still there. Professor Gong, from your observation, what do you think are the necessary or effective government policies at this stage in order to further stimulate SMEs recovery?
Well, I think the Chinese government has traditionally been doing a lot of things in support of the business community that has introduced a list of policies trying to help companies to weather through this, this pandemic over the last 3 years or so. I think probably right now the most important thing is to restore, I would say, sort of like the economic order right now, to restore market confidence, to restore the normal business rhythm in societies. I think right now we are rapidly opening up. Things are starting to recover, but as has been seen in places like Singapore and Hong Kong, there's already a rapid ramp up of infections throughout China. And I've read some reports saying that in some cities in China already we have reached like 60-70% of infection, which effectively is community immunity. So I think we are rapidly approaching that threshold. And from now on, I would imagine, like, after the spring break, we're going to have a very quiet spring break, in my view. I think people are still very concerned about going out. But I think right after the spring break, things should be coming back to normal. I think the most uncertain issue right now is still concerning the medical and the public health side. I hope, there are the new variants, so-called new variants coming into China will not have such a lethal impact on us anymore. And I think from government's perspective, I think the most important thing is still in the realm of public policy, public health policy, not so much in the economic side, I think. I think we just have to be a little bit more patient to wait for a few more weeks. And I think from February on, we should be in much better shape. The Chinese economy is still very resilient.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So resilience is probably very important at this stage of life, especially during the road to recovery in China. So Siqi, let me follow up with asking you this. If we look at the numbers, the total VC volume investing into the market was down about 10% in the US, 25% in Europe, and about 40% in China. And that is the reality. How do you think the number will pick up? And when do you think a full recovery will happen?
I think, maybe from the GDP side, the CPI side, all the statistics shows a little bit slowdown in the year of 2020. But I think that's a technical recession in also the PVC field. But we have seen also very strong foundation for the recovery, because of that. After 40 years of the opening up, we have a very sophisticated industrial like a foundation. And also from, I think as a cross-border fund, I think I would probably more mentioned about China and EU. And likewise, the European economy led by France and Germany, they also have a very strong industrial foundation and also very creative innovation gene. And also they have played a very important role in the global supply chain. So we can foresee a very a strong recovery in the shortcoming future. I think that's set up a very good platform for the PVC investment. And as I have mentioned, that the 70% of our money are coming from EU, and actually all of them are trying to explore the business opportunity here. And most of our Paris office colleague and Munich office colleague are receiving more and more European PVC firms, and which are looking into the investment in China.
Right.
So we believe this is going to happen in coming 6-12 months, but the long-term recovery will last probably more than that.
Right, that's really good to hear. So Mr. Wang Zhengwei, who is from BLG Group, let me ask you this. When this time, after 3 years, you finally step out of the door and go to meet with your European side counterparties and your clients and customers, what are their reactions to you? 我这个问题是问这个王总哈，他是 BLG Group 的副总裁。就3年以后您终于这个踏出国门到欧洲见到了你的这个商业伙伴，他们见到你的时候反应是什么样的
？3年疫情啊，确实让我们跟我们欧洲的客户都是万眼欲穿。当我们的业务员在巴黎展会、FIE 展会出现在我们客户面前的时候。
We made ourselves in front of our partners, and they say, long time no see. They were very excited. After all, we haven't met in 3 years' time. We even hugged each other.
3年以来呢，因为这个双方的交流啊，
In the past 3 years,
只能通过邮件
we could only communicate with each other through email
跟面对面的交流是完全不一样。
It's different from face-to-face communication. So in the Paris fair, in 3 days' time,
每个业务员在1天就会接待60多个客户。
Our employees receive like 60 customers in 1 day, and that went on for 3 days in a row. So we were very busy. They finally got to meet the customers who they haven't seen for 3 years. In such communication, they could learn more about their products, and especially, for example, the food additives development in Europe. And our customers have dispelled their confusions or suspicions about China. Because Europe and the American countries may have different interpretations about China's policies, especially when it concerns supply chain safety or food safety. They were kind of worried. So through face-to-face communication, such suspicions were rooted out, and they had more confidence in their partnership with us. For my company, BLG Group, in 2022, we had a new plant built in Ningxia, which was already put into operation now. Ever since its operation, globally, it is very influential. And our customers have learned about this new plant when we visited Paris. What products will come out of the production line in that new plant, and what's going to be the capacity in the plant? Through such face-to-face communication, they got the new numbers. They were eager to acquire such information from us. In my communication with my European customers, I deliver such information to them earnestly. So in 3 days' time in Paris, we got some new orders. Of course, later on there will be a series of other exhibitions and fairs for us to attend. For example, in Monterrey, in Mexico, there will be another fair, and then we will pay visit to Bangkok and others.
3年的时间确实让这个面对面的沟通变得非常的珍贵哈，但现在一旦全部都开放的话，这个面对面的机会会越来越多，这样的话呢，人和人的交流也会更充分。生意的本质其实就是信任，那信任呢，可能是要建立在长期稳定的基础上。I was saying that 3 years pandemic was really prevent people from face-to-face communication. Now with all the doors are opening, hopefully more people contact will generate more business yields, because business is really based on trust, and trust is based on steady long-term relationship. And Mr. Wang mentioned a very critical point, which is the stability of supply chain. I noticed that Helga Zepa-LaRouche, who is the founder and president of Schiller Institute, just joined us. Welcome. So from your perspective, how do you view the reliance on China's supply chain post-pandemic after these 3 years? Can the supply chain really be easily shifted to other places, and is it even necessary?
I think there is an effort right now by people who want to diversify, but I don't think this will function. I heard that some of the previous participants in this Zoom meeting are very optimistic about the perspective for the coming year. I think one has to be a little bit more on the guard, because while the Chinese parameters are very good and all of Asia is looking very good, I'm not so optimistic about especially Europe and the United States. I think that the difficulty of the central banks to fight inflation with increasing the interest rate, which already led to some shakeups in the cryptocurrency markets, and this was just the beginning, because these central banks are in a between a rock and a hard place. If they want to fight inflation by increasing the interest rate, that risks the bankruptcy of some of the most exposed market participants. If they don't do it by going back from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing, then inflation is rising again. And I'm sharing the opinion of a minority view of experts that the big financial crisis, much bigger than 2008, will come. It's just a question when. It's very difficult to predict exactly when that will happen.
Right.
So I think that all the countries which are putting more emphasis on physical assets, on production, on infrastructure, on investment in real economy, are going to be much better off. But I foresee that a big crisis is coming, and it's not avoidable, because the only way how you could avoid it would be to stop the casino economy. But there is no sign in Europe and the United States right now that they want to do it. So I think that the more countries are putting emphasis on the, just the actual physical economy, the projects which are leading to an increase in the productivity of the physical economy, they will be much better guarded in the coming period.
Right.
So I know that.
Right. Professor Gong, what is your take? Well, basically, Helga is saying that we need to be cautiously optimistic towards 2023 prospect. What if, EU and America really falls into recession? Well, hopefully not. How would that actually affect global supply chain?
Yeah, well, I fully respect my friend Helga's opinion. However, I stay somewhat in between, I would say. I think there's still a distinction between the United States and the European Union economies. Relatively speaking, I think U.S. probably is a little bit of a better shape. I mean, if you look at the numbers, look at the unemployment numbers, for example, you look at the GDP growth, you look at the business activities, look at the balance sheet of corporate America, they're all pretty strong, actually. I totally agree that there's an inflation problem. As a matter of fact, that the inflation is coming down a little bit. I think it's in the It's at about like 7% right now, and I'm no doubt that the Feds will continue its pace of increasing interest rate. However, I think its impact on a job market, on the corporate world is probably still limited, I would say. Even though, of course, in some sectors are indeed slowing down. For example, the housing market, the new house startups, I mean, the lumber price, for example, I mean, they're all not doing so great these days. Europe does have a problem. I totally agree that Europe is a severe problem. And I think the fundamental reason has a lot to do with this ongoing war in Ukraine. As long as this war is going, I don't see any hope of European economies coming back anytime soon. And there's also on top of this issue of, investments, companies are leaving European markets. So, that's very troublesome. And I think from China's exports perspective, the European market is actually, a bit larger than the North American market for us. So that's very concerning. I think the Chinese exports has been doing quite well up until, the third quarter of last year. And moving forward, I think there's going to be a huge challenge given the global macro environment, given the headwinds we're facing right now, and particularly in the European market. So I think that's a very legitimate concern. I totally agree with Hag on this point.
Right. So what if that EU and US they do fall into recession? How much will that impact your business, Lilian? Do you have a view? 假设如果真的是欧洲和美国他们陷入经济衰退的话，对你们的业务影响大概会有多大？
Our main marketing is like in the Middle East, and also we start from the USA and Europe. Now is the Middle East market is our main market, main market. So depend on we already got the UL certification and the European standard certification. We will be depend on like USA, USA idea and European technology, and we are very lucky we can win more and more order from the Middle Eastern market.
Right. So your business is more or less hedged. Mr. Wang, what about you? 王总，你们的业务呢？就是假设如果欧洲和美国衰退的话。
For example,
我们认为这种情况发生的概率不大。
We believe that it has a very low likelihood.
我们的业务60%、70%
to 70% of our business come from foreign trade.
相对来讲附加值比较高。
Because our products have higher added value.
这个使用
In Europe and the US, our products entered into those markets very early on.
中国
Right now,
这个使用的这个市场在扩大。
in China, we have also scaled up our market.
市场
But
从我们公司来讲的话，还是
in terms of my company, my main markets are still in Europe and the US. So participating in those exhibitions in Europe would be very beneficial because 30 to 40% of our customers come from Europe.
我们再问厅长一个问题哈，就是厅长在整个浙江的外贸的组成的过程，组成的这个盘子里头有多少订单，或者说多少业务量其实是来自欧洲和美国的？那这个问题同样也是问到您，因为您在当这个家哈。假设如果真的是这两个地区陷入一定程度的经济衰退的话，会对我们有什么样的影响？尤其出口型企业。So my this question is to Chen Tingjang, who is the Deputy Director General of Department of Commerce of Zhejiang Province. I asked him what is the mix looking like in the total export of Zhejiang Province. How much of the total export is from EU and US combined? And what if EU and US, they do fall into recession? How big of an impact will generate to the overall economy in Zhejiang Province?
这样就是那个欧盟跟美国啊，这两个市场也是我们这个最大的这个前两位的市场。
Those two also rank
所以呢，就是
the top
这
two
个
for
应该
us.
说这个一受这个通胀啊，还有各方面
Due to inflation and other factors,
外贸企业
many foreign trade companies in Zhejiang gave us feedback that the demand has been impacted.
我们也在想另外一个事情，一个呢就是
If you look at it another way, products matter. For example, those replaceable products and irreplaceable products. For example, PV products in energy sector. They may have different growth rate, so demands still exist. In the US market, it's a very vast market, including high-end and low-end products. China and Zhejiang included enjoy our supply chain advantage. So the thing is how we explore those markets. I do hold the view that face-to-face communication is better than everything else. We would organize more domestic enterprises, including those in Zhejiang, to engage with those customers overseas. Then we can highlight and give better play to our supply chain advantages. In 2023, we are quite optimistic about foreign trade. In addition to EU and the US, we are also aligning with the other markets. We hope to go further. So, for the prospect of 2023, we are quite optimistic about the foreign trade.
谢谢您厅长，这个是一针强心剂哈，我们有各种各样的对策然后来应对可能发生的一些国际经济形势的转换。谢谢您。思琪 from your observation, the global supply chain during past 3 years pandemic, some are saying that they're trying to shift it away from China and relocate it to Southeastern Asia countries and somewhere else. Do you think it is really happening? And do you think it is necessary from your observation?
I actually just back from Singapore, and we have been a long trip in Southeast Asia.
Right.
I don't think it's happening because of 3 reasons. One is that compared to Southeast Asia, China has a very strong industrial foundation. And secondly, I think you have to pay attention to the engineer, which has been built up during the past 30 years, the good education system in China. So you can find the hardware easily in the Southeast Asia, but you cannot find the mature and sophisticated engineers in Southeast Asia in the coming 3 years. All the brilliant is take you 10 to 15 years to educate it. And the third one is that I think you have noticed that the infrastructure, the port, the highways, as of now, they are still kind of weak in Southeast Asia compared to China. So I think we do have to have a strong confidence in this, in the mainland China. Right. We are an amazing country.
Right. Since, as you mentioned, 75% of your fund are from European LPs. Do you really see EU is falling into a recession, as what Helga just mentioned?
I do share kind of a different view on this one. I think probably I can start it with the US, technically recession, but I think the historical statistic shows that the US can always recover in around 20 to 24 months. And as I mentioned, that the EU economy led by the France and Germany, they have a very strong industrial platform, and they have a very innovative gene in their system.
Right.
And thirdly, I think they have been playing very important role in the global supply chain. So you cannot ignore all this. I think those 3 pillars would probably come up with a very rapid recovery in the EU.
Right.
Of course, that's if the Ukrainian system will be recovered soon.
Right. So if that does really happen, the recovery comes over globally, it should benefit the export companies in China as well. 邵局长您好，您在这个金华是父母官，然后呢直接面对当地的这些企业。过去3年大家都很不容易，接下来您打算用哪些具体的措施帮助企业去复苏呢？另外有没有适当的监管机制来督促你们这个父母官把这个事儿做好？ I was asking Mr. Xiao Yinhua, who is the Deputy Director of Jinhua Commerce Bureau of Zhejiang, what are the detailed local government policy will be issued to further stimulate the recovery and to help SMEs to recover? And also, do we have a supervisory mechanism to ensure all those policies are carried to its place?
主持人好，刚才这个专家
Just now, the previous speakers shared from a macro perspective about a recovery, and entrepreneurs started from a micro perspective about their future. As a local government representative, my job is to look at the middle. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to share about the plan, how to embrace this recovery. Especially in Zhejiang Province, it is home to more private enterprises. We open our doors wider to the outside world. How to make full use of the BRI initiative as a public good. How to make full use of the 21 batches. And how to make full use of debt. Those are all public goods and good platforms. Going overseas to have face-to-face communication is one way. It will help us to connect with new customers and renew our friendship with the old customers. It's a main channel, but we have more than that. For example, we have transnational e-commerce platforms, and we have some new forms of trade. We can explore more markets through those new forms. In Zhejiang Jinhua, we have a good foundation of e-commerce. Now, about 160,000 businesses are registered in the e-commerce platforms, for example, Amazon, Lazada, and others. So in the next step, we will try to dig deeper into those platforms. In the previous years, Amazon may have some sanctions or close down some accounts, which was influential to us. So we will try to correct. And we may also go to B.
Helga, let me ask you this. SMEs, they generate 70% of GDP for a country, for China, and 90% of the employment in China. And I assume this is a general situation for other countries as well. Over the years, during different cycles, during different global economic cycles, ups and downs, what role will government play in order to stimulate, the recovery of SMEs, especially during the downturns?
Well, I mean, in times of crisis, the government is the only guarantee for a recovery and to give the framework. I think that puts in an advantage countries like China or other countries who have a stronger role of the state. I hate to come back to the point, but I'm not so optimistic about the coming year. I think we are going to see a big financial crisis, and those countries who are preparing for that will be much better off. I think we will see either a collapse because of a hyperinflation or a collapse because of quantitative tightening, and either way we will end up in a depression in Europe.
Right.
The IFO Institute in Munich just said that the energy change in Germany completely failed. We have a huge energy crisis. And if the German economy has severe problems, this will affect all of Europe. I think it's better to prepare for a coming crisis and what to do about it to safeguard the economy against it, rather than having an optimistic view and then being caught by surprise. I think we are going to see a crisis much bigger than 2008, because in 2008, which was already a systemic crisis, none of the root causes was remedied. So, I think that the efforts to have an alternative system, as it is now being entertained by the Eurasian Economic Union and some other countries, of the global south, that I think the European countries will be forced to make a decision, what will be the wise thing for them to do. And I think the more quickly people in Europe recognize that, to line up with the new emerging system, the better it will be.
Right.
And that naturally looks very difficult right now, but I think the crisis will force such a decision.
Well, Helga, you mentioned a very important factor, which is the government. The government is almost the last resort in the time of crisis, as you just mentioned. Professor Gong, well, in China, I'm sure you know, on one hand, we have a lot of SMEs. They're very resilient. In a time of crisis, they try to do their self-redemption first and earlier than anyone else. On the other hand, we're seeing that government is issuing policies, try to give more support to SMEs. How to make sure those policies are really carried out and making sure SMEs, they do get equal status when they face those, SOEs, especially financing part?
Well, let me first say that I totally agree with Helga. Actually, actually, I'm not that optimistic. I think we're heading into a very difficult year, especially for China's exports. Now, back to your question about the SOE and how the government can help them. In my view, I think the devil is in the details. I think the government can adopt various policies trying to help small and medium-sized businesses, but I think at the end of the day, it's really the business environment, the regulatory environment that determines and drive these things. I think what the government can do is just to make sure that various levels and various branches, they don't go out of the way to add burdens to the small and medium-sized businesses. It's actually not just small and medium-sized business, all private businesses, trying to leave them alone, or at least not to bother them, and in some ways also help them to the extent they can. For example, in terms of access to credit, in terms of facilitating various government functions to make these companies doing business a lot easier. For example, I think one of the speakers today mentioned the ease of helping company executives to make passports a lot faster. And these are one of the things that certainly the government can do. So I think that this question really boils down to a level playing field, a better business environment, better regulatory environment, and these are the areas that the Chinese government has a lot of room to improve, in my view, especially in counties and in cities that more inland, I guess. In short, I can't emphasizing enough of the challenge lying ahead. Now, I actually had back to disagree with the previous speaker's view about the supply chain outsourcing thing. I think we're facing a huge challenge. If you look at the news that are coming from Apple, for example, today's news from Dell Computer, for example. I mean, American companies are indeed starting to outsource things out of China, and that's a fact. You look at what's happening in Thailand, for example, in Malaysia, investments in Vietnam, for example. Investments are indeed pouring in, including actually companies from China. So that's very solid empirical evidence that to some extent we're indeed facing a supply chain a challenge, that companies are indeed moving at least some part of their operations out of China. I mean, that's a huge challenge in my view. So 2023 will be a difficult year, and I think Hank is absolutely right that we'll be better prepared for that, as opposed to be caught off guard by a surprise.
Right. So getting prepared is always the right thing to do. Siqi, do you have anything to respond on this particular issue of the supply chain, as what Professor Gong just mentioned?
Actually, I think, of course, that we have seen a diversify from a lot of global players in the past 3 years to the Southeast Asia. But as I mentioned, that's probably because of the pandemic. But after the reopen, I think the sophisticated industrial foundation, the engineer base, and the infrastructure will bring most of them back. I wouldn't say all of them, but I think we'll bring most of them back to China. I'm still very positive about the economy growth here.
Right, great. So ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you again for taking time to participate in today's conference, today's panel. Due to time constraint, we will have to end here. As you all mentioned, there are a lot of challenges and opportunities coexisting, but let's hope for a better 2023. I'm Kate Kui from CGTN Beijing. Until next time, bye for now.